Hello everyone, my name is Elle. Welcome to another episode of Palettes I Wish Existed. I already did this with Urban Decay as well as Anastasia of Beverly Hills. Now I'm taking on Kat Von D. So I will have those previous two videos linked down below in case you are interested if you happen to miss them. I talk about 5 Urban Decay eyeshadow palettes I wish existed and 3 from Anastasia. And for Kat Von D, I also did 3. I feel like 3 is a good number because I get to showcase a little bit of everything and I get to explore some different concepts and themes and talk about what I really wish was out there right now in terms of eyeshadow. So let me just stress before we dive in here that this is 100% fictional. I have absolutely no ties to Kat Von D or any other makeup brand whatsoever. This is just for fun. This is what I call palette fan fiction. It allows me to be creative and think outside of the brand or even beauty industry canon. I can just come up with whatever I want. You may not like one of these or any of these, and that's okay because it's not real. So if you don't like them, I would like to hear from you and what you would design instead. So anyway, that's enough of the disclaimer because I think you get the point. Not real, just for fun. And it really sparks discussion. I've had some great discussions with people in the comment section of the last 2 I did, talking about what people want and what they would use instead and where they get inspiration from. So I hope you will join me in the conversation. But let's start with palette number 1, which is a fairly simple one. I'm calling it Fairies Wear Boots, after my favorite Black Sabbath song. So this is a mostly purple palette. So I wanted it to be fun and playful and on trend with the mythological creatures thing, although I think we can retire unicorns and mermaids now. And I wanted it to have a little bit of darkness, a little bit of a mischievous, whimsical feel. I am just mildly obsessed with mythology and folklore and fairy tales. I just love all things magic. And I have long had a passion for fairies. And yes, some of this is because of Neopets, I can admit that. But seriously, real fairy tales, writings, poems, W.B. Yeats, fairy and folk tales of Ireland, also art, of course. Art really influenced the way that we view fairies right now, the image we have in our head. Like, I'm sure a lot of people are thinking like the curly hair, probably blonde, flower crowns, you know, very, very pretty, and you know, they have these images for a reason because they started to exist in artwork. I know when I was younger, I had these books by Cecily Mary Barker. They're illustrations and they are such beautiful little flower fairies, and I definitely think a lot of my idea of fairies came from images like that, and not just stories, but making up my own stories and what I would imagine their lives would be like. You know, being a little creative kid, you would think about stuff like that, like a sunflower fairy, what would their life have been like? And I know that definitely shaped a lot of my love for those mythological creatures. So there are 8 shadows in this palette, just like Pastel Goth. I really wanted to do something similar to what Kat Von D had done in structure. I really challenge myself with these videos to try and think inside of the brand's box, because I feel like, especially a brand like Kat Von D, has a very clear aesthetic, and I wanted to find stuff that fit within there, but still kind of reflected my own opinions and what I wanted. So I was just challenging myself to kind of try and meet both the best that I could. It's fun. It really is a lot of fun to try and do that. And I went back and forth with like color schemes of this palette so many times, what I wanted, what kind of tones I wanted. I had fun. I don't even have Photoshop. This was just really enjoyable. I normally don't name the shadows and stuff, but for this one I did because I wanted to. I just was having so much fun with it. So the first shade is this very pale yellow gold highlighter, but I wanted to have a clear base. I don't want a white base because I feel like that looks too chalky sometimes. I want a clear base, sort of like the Metal Crush highlighter formula, so that when you like swatched it, if you held your hand still, you wouldn't see much of anything, and it wouldn't be until it caught the light that you would see that golden sheen. I love the way that golds pair with purple, especially something like this would be a really pretty highlight color, or something that could be used sort of like on the inner portion of the lid, or the brow bone highlight, or even as like a pop in the center of your lid for like a halo eye or spotlight eye or whatever you want to call it. My eye look today is definitely inspired by the color scheme of my fictional palette. I wanted to see what I had that could kind of match that, and I used a lot of expensive things. But anyway, I would call that shadow Fly Away. The next shade is Enchanted, and it's a duochromatic purple to pink with a little tiny bit of blue glitter. The third shade is Wicked, a bright purple metallic. Fourth is Puck, a matte pink with subtle purple undertones. Fifth is a matte heather purple called Godmother, totally inspired by the Godmother's hair from Shrek 2. Pretty much my favorite fairy ever. Shadow 6 is called Dream On, and it is a bright matte orchid. Shadow 7 is a matte magenta called Fairy Queen. And 8th is a deep matte eggplant called For a Dancer. So I really enjoyed coming up with those names. I've been working on this for a couple of weeks. I really wanted to have something that I was really proud of, and I'm definitely really proud of these. So the second palette is going to be something a little bit darker, because Fairies Wear Boots is definitely a light, playful, mini little palette that you could have a lot of fun with. And the second thing, so Kat Von D had a variety of these cool mini palettes with very interesting color schemes. These were years ago, I think like 5 or 6 years ago. And I don't see stuff like that anymore. And I wanted to pull inspiration from some of those older palettes that have long been discontinued. A couple of those had really pretty blues and silvers in them, so this is partially inspired by those. So before I tell you the whole inspiration behind the palette, I want to show you. I wanted it to be a little haunting, perhaps even a little bit scary. If your first thought is, what the heck am I gonna do with that? Then I've accomplished my goal. This is the Nevermore palette, loosely inspired by Gothic literature. So the title, of course, comes from Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven. Quoth the Raven, nevermore. Personally, I have two favorite types of Gothic literature. Romantic era, so Poe, Mary Shelley, Lord Byron, etc., and Southern Gothic literature. William Faulkner, Flannery O'Connor, and my favorite, Truman Capote. And even Tennessee Williams. He's a playwright, but I definitely think he falls under the Southern Gothic literature umbrella. There was also this painting I saw from a German romantic landscape painter, and if you saw my Anastasia palettes video, I talked about landscape art and how much I love that and how inspired I am by that. And of course it's gonna be there in like all the things I'm inspired by in some level. I love looking at like a painting like this because it just gives my heart a little jolt. The concept of the sublime in art and literature is just something that I keep going back to. I just love Gothic literature, especially when it combines like the morbid and decrepit and terrifying with just beautiful romantic settings and decadence and maybe even fantasy. Like I just love all of those things together. I feel like I'm a little light and a little dark, or a lot dark. I know this is a lot for a make-believe makeup concept, but here we are. So this would be a 12-pan palette, similar to the Shade and Light palettes, as well as some of the previous Kat Von D palettes that she had before that have also been discontinued. I really like this layout because you have 3 sort of grounding shades, or you can, and then you have 9 other shades. And I like the idea of having the larger pans that you would theoretically use more of. So I would name all of these shadows, all 12 of them, after Gothic literature writers. So starting with the 3 large pans, it's 3 shades of gray. We have a pale matte gray, a medium gray and a charcoal gray, because this is a cool tone palette, and gray doesn't have to be cool tone. Gray is usually actually pretty neutral, but gray and blue really pairs well together, so I thought this would give a variety of grays depending on what you wanted to use them for. So down to the shadows. The first one you'll have to use your imagination for a little bit. It was hard finding exactly what I wanted, but I wanted a reddish pink light highlighter shade similar to the yellow gold shade I described in the Fairies Wear Boots, and I wanted a little bit of gold glitter in here because I feel like red and pink looks so beautiful contrasting against blue, and also gold and blue. I feel like a lot of times silver, grays and stuff is paired with blues, but gold is so pretty, and just to have a little tiny bit of gold glitter I think would be so interesting, you know, with like a deep blue smoky eye and that little pop of pinkish gold in the inner corner. I think it would be so cool. I was like playing around with some of the Urban Decay glitters I have, like Grind, and there's another one I can't remember the name of right now that's pink, and Midnight Cowboy, and sort of like layering pinks and golds together, and I was like, oh yes, with blue it'd be so good. So then that's just an unusual fantasy thing that probably can't even happen, but you know, if I could play, if I could experiment a little bit, I would definitely try. The next shade is a matte denim blue. I'm looking down because I have it on my phone right now. Then there would be a muted matte sky blue with just a little hint of green. Then a deep teal with a tiny bit of shimmer. A frosty silver metallic, because I do really love silvers and blues. I know I said I love golds, but golds and silvers, I love them all. A bright matte baby blue, a matte royal blue. Can you tell I love my blue eyeshadow? A metallic blue-green with silver glitter. I will get it one way or another. I will get my Silver Springs inspired color. And finally, a deep wine red for a little bit more contrast. I didn't want to go with a black because I feel like a black would be too obvious, and everybody probably has a black eyeshadow at this point. I don't feel like something like this, the Nevermore palette, or Fairies Wear Boots would be people's first palettes. I don't feel like they would be the first palette somebody would ever buy. I feel like they are definitely palettes that people would add to what they already have and use with what they have too. I don't feel like every palette has to be a standalone palette that you can only use from them. It's great to create a lot of looks and to have a lot of options, but you don't have to just reach within there, which is why I didn't want too many transition-y tones, because how many people have neutral palettes already? That's what I feel like would go well with this, you know, those various neutral transition shades. Even something like the Shade and Light palette would pair well with this sky. All right, so that brings us to the third and final fictional palette, and if you thought the last two were extravagant, wait till you see this creature. So I really want a Baroque themed eyeshadow palette. Baroque is a style of architecture and art and music that really thrived during the 17th to like late 18th century in Europe. It is almost synonymous with being exuberant and over the top. I can't improve a dictionary definition, so excuse me while I read this quote. It relates to the art movement, not the whole movement itself, but it notes that Baroque is the juxtaposition of contrasting elements, often conveying a sense of drama, movement, and tension. So my fantasy palette would be one of those giant behemoths that Kat Von D releases around the holiday times. Now, as I mentioned before, I don't have Photoshop, so you'll have to use your imagination a little bit here. So I'm calling this palette Symphonies and Sonatas. Music and alliteration, two of my favorite things. So the shape of this palette would be a massive semicircle inspired by a modern orchestra layout. I know this is an unusual shape for an eyeshadow palette, but interesting fact, if you look up the origin of the word Baroque, it is theorized to come from the Portuguese or Italian word barocco, which means an irregular shaped pearl. I'm an onion. The outside of the palette would have rich golds and reds and have that feeling of a luxurious concert hall. The shadows would be laid out accordingly, a mixture of mattes and metallics and shimmers. And there would be 25 shades. Normally it's something like 24, but I'm doing 25. Now, I'm not taking inspiration strictly from Baroque art. There's definitely a little neoclassical and like a touch of romanticism because I can't leave it alone. But I was inspired by art and just the way music spoke to me, the colors I thought of when I listened to certain music pieces, which I know sounds strange, but certain songs make me think of certain colors. So right at the bottom would be a matte black shade. This would be like the conductor shade. And I know there will be people who say that a conductor is not necessary, just like a black eyeshadow, and I'm telling you, you're wrong. Black eyeshadow can really be used to deepen and define. It's very versatile, and I feel like it's definitely needed in a palette like this. And I also wanted the palette to be distributed a little chaotically. I didn't want it to be evenly distributed. So there are 12 mattes and 12 metallics, and those are split evenly between jewel tones and metals and warm browns. If you look at it split right in half, so you have jewel tones on one side and then the metals and warm matte neutrals on the other, it looks more cohesive, but I feel like that leads to boredom. I think that would really limit people if it was really split up in a way like that, that people would reach for one section or another. They wouldn't mix them together, and that's the fun. A sparkling emerald green with a mustard crease, gold with rich blue or purple, silver with green or red, peach with blue or gold. Like, there are so many options, and I feel like a lot of people wouldn't be able to see the options if it wasn't laid out in front of them. I think if you see it look a little bit more chaotic, you're going to be more likely to pull from here and here as opposed to pulling from one column. But in my fantasy world, the shadows would follow that semicircle shape. It just wouldn't be like a row of mattes, a row of metallics. They'd be a little all over the place. And of course, the shadows would be named after the different nicknames of symphonies and sonatas. So things like Winter Dreams, Moonlight, Spring, Devil's Trill, etc. So my color choices are fairly straightforward. I'll go through them pretty quickly. So starting in the back row, there is a deep purple, a ruby red, a sapphire, an emerald. Right underneath the emerald is a magenta, and then on the opposite side is a citrine. Then there are some metallics, copper, bronze, gold, silver, yellow gold, and pewter. Then shimmery and metallic jewel tones. So it echoes a lot of the same mattes. Sapphire, emerald, ruby, amethyst, also a highlighter opal, because I think that would be really pretty, and a light shimmery turquoise. Then finally, the neutral, safe, warm mattes. A warm gray, a muted peach, a muted tawny brown, a mustard shade, a ginger shade, and a reddish brown. It's not revolutionary, but I think it would be gorgeous and so versatile for many people. I don't think it really would limit anybody because you have your options between the neutral shades. You have some beautiful bold pops of color. You can do a neutral lid and a really bold color. You have some of these like more festive-y shades, but shades that you can wear all year round. And the colors are not so unusual that I think it could appeal maybe even a little bit outside of Kat Von D's demographic. So anyway, that is everything for palettes I wish existed from Kat Von D. I really love the Kat Von D aesthetic, as I talked about in the brands that inspire me video as well. I talk about a number of different brands that inspire me, but I'd like to know what you would create. What would you create from Kat Von D or any other brand? And if you have any requests for any other brands you would like to see me tackle, any other brands aesthetic you would like to see my take on, please let me know. I just really enjoy doing research and coming up with various color schemes and thinking about ways I would use eyeshadow differently and what I feel like is missing or could be better. These are definitely things that I would buy the minute they came out. I feel like there's nothing quite like any of these three, and that's what I wanted to accomplish. So anyway, I hope we can chat about this in the comments. I would love to hear from you. What would you change? What wouldn't you change? Would you buy any of these palettes? What would you differently, etc., etc. Let's get to talking. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope we get a chance to chat soon. Bye for now.